Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're starting the side event on clean air, and I'm here together with my colleague Anna, and we will quickly introduce ourselves, and then we will start.
Hello everyone, we're super excited to be joined by you all today here at the side event on Clean Air, a youth-led initiative for the right on global health. So my name is Anna, I'm the UN Youth Delegate for Sustainable Development of the Flemish Youth Council, so I'm here to represent the voice of Belgian young people at COP27, and I'm super happy to be moderating this side event today with my colleague Sarah.
Yes, so I'm Sarah, and I'm one of the UN Dutch youth representatives on sustainable development. And today we will organize a side event about clean air, as Anna just described. And I quickly want to focus on a few objectives that we want to highlight today, because we want to share scientific knowledge about this topic, and we want to acknowledge climate discrimination between different groups within this theme. We also want to raise awareness and address the importance of clean air, and most importantly, we want to highlight the importance of engaging with youth and future generations within these policies. So I think that's it from the objective side, and what the main focus points are for this side event, and we can start the side event.
Yes, I think that the right to clean air is a subject that is very well alive. And also today we are honored to show you a video statement by the Dutch Minister for Environment, Viviane Heijnen. Can we have the video statement?
Oh no, the other one with the Minister for the Environment.
Hello everyone. It makes me happy that so many young people have joined forces and are taking the stage today. During this event, you will shape and share your views on tackling one of the biggest challenges that we're facing. All the negotiations and policy making taking place here at COP27 will affect the world that future generations will inhabit. It is my conviction that young people must have a say in the decisions that will shape that future. Unfortunately, you are rarely invited to join discussions about policies that affect you directly. Your contribution is even more important when it comes to the nexus of air pollution and climate change. Air pollutants not only have a negative effect on the air we breathe, they often also contribute to global warming. This means that policies aimed at tackling air pollution tend to tackle global warming too. Countries with the highest burden of air pollution and climate change impacts often also have relatively young populations. That makes youth participation on such themes even more critical. My own government is taking necessary steps to better include the voices of younger generations. For example, by investigating the implementation of a generational impact assessment to examine how new policy will affect future generations. We've also been supporting the Dutch Youth Advisory Committee on the Environment for several years now. We all need to step up our efforts to give youth a stronger position at global level. For instance, earlier this year, one of our youth representatives and I delivered our national statements together at the Stockholm Plus 50 conference. To conclude, let this event again underscore that you ought to be at the table, that your voices should not only deserve to be heard, but that they are essential in making inclusive and effective policy for a future-proof planet. I will do my best to bring you to those policy-making tables. You can count on me, and I wish you all an inspiring event, and I'll see you in a couple of days at COP27.
Amazing, thank you so much. We thank the Minister for this welcoming statement underlining youth participation in tackling air pollution. We will now move to our next speaker, who is Heather Adayir-Rouhani. Heather is the acting unit head of the Air Quality and Health Unit at the WHO. So we're very excited to hear from her about what the problem is, what the landscape is that this debate is taking place in. We'll now have the next video statement, please.
Hello, my name is Heather Darahani, and I'm the Acting Unit Head of Air Quality and Health at the World Health Organization headquarters in Geneva. I'm honored to be invited today to share some information about air pollution and its health risks, but more importantly, the actions that we can take as a global community to tackle air pollution as a means to protect the health of our people and planet. So let's begin. Air pollution is the largest environmental risk factor facing the world today. WHO estimates that 99% of the world's population is exposed to unsafe levels of air pollution, and this leads to some 7 million deaths each year. That's right, 7 million. From diseases including ischemic heart disease, stroke, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, lung cancer, and pneumonia. Now, other diseases are also associated with exposure to air pollution, for which we have emerging evidence include diabetes, adverse pregnancy outcomes such as low birth weight, as well as cognitive impairment. 7 million is a big number, but only looking at the deaths to air pollution is just painting part of the picture. Many of the diseases associated with air pollution exposure really cause a disability, a handicap for these people living with these diseases each and every day. The labored breaths have a significant impact on things like going to school, making it hard to go to work, and do other basic daily activities. And like health, air pollution is an equity issue. The air we breathe is not equal, so it's often the poorest populations that are paying the cost of air pollution. Air pollution is a risk that knows no borders, and it is often the air quality is poorest in these low-income communities, whether that may be poor countries or low-income neighborhoods in high-income countries. So what can we do about it? What is WHO doing about air pollution? WHO is really working to leverage the health argument for action on air pollution, calling on policymakers in different sectors to really understand the health risks associated with air pollution and that there are solutions and interventions that they can help and implement and take action. WHO is also synthesizing the epidemiological evidence to understand at what levels of air pollution can be considered safe for health, what diseases are strongly associated with air pollution, and providing that normative guidance that can be used by governments and other stakeholders to take action on air pollution. WHO is also working to identify those most polluting sectors for health, provide guidance and best practices for countries to follow in order to mitigate the health impacts of air pollution. As it's not the health sector alone who can tackle air pollution, and therefore we need to bring all the different actors around the table to discuss the solutions to air pollution and to know that they are empowered and need to take action to mitigate this health risk. WHO also monitors the exposure and disease burden from air pollution so countries and communities can understand the health risks associated with air pollution and what is their local disease burden. What is the loss of life? What is the disability caused by air pollution in their communities? We're working to build a business case for air pollution to make sure that we have that Ministry of Finance around the table to understand the trillions of dollars that poor air quality is costing the world from things like lost productivity, as well as health care costs, etc. WHO is also working to train health practitioners about the health risks of air pollution and providing with the knowledge to prescribe clean air for health in their clinical practice and serve as advocates for public policy on air pollution. WHO is also trying to provide the knowledge and evidence to individuals about what are the health risks from air pollution and what are some actions that can be taken by individuals to protect themselves from air pollution. But more importantly, advocate and call for government action for cleaner air. We need the community to be calling on policymakers to put in regulations on emissions and enforcing those emission regulations. We need the governments to be building greener cities and communities with effective clean public transport systems. We need governments to be providing clean cooking, heating, and lighting to households who are relying on open fires and biomass fuels each and every day to meet their daily needs for food and to stay warm on a cold night. We need to find solutions for waste management. Just burning them in communities is destroying all the health of the people in that We need to work at replacing coal-fired power plants with cleaner alternatives. The list is long, and we want governments and countries to act, and we need everyone's voice to make sure that these solutions are put in place. So what can the youth do? Well, the youth are our future. We need to better integrate air pollution into our youth education and empower them to call and take action to tackle air pollution. We need the youth to call up their policymakers, demanding they prioritize air pollution mitigation as a means to protect the health of the young and old alike. The youth are voters now and for a long time in the future. We also need the youth to lead by example. We need them to be taking public transport. We need to be promoting clean technologies, and we need to be demanding this action from policymakers that maybe the older populations are not doing. We need to learn from you. We also need the youth to take action on science for air pollution. We need more epidemiologists looking at air pollution. We need them to conducting research looking at the health risks from air pollution. And more importantly, the related interventions to know what works and what doesn't, so governments have the evidence for action. We need the youth to demand air pollution is integrated into school curriculums, particularly even medical school curriculums. In many communities around the world, air pollution is not even considered in the training that doctors, nurses, and midwives are given. So how can they call and prescribe clean air for their populations if they don't even understand fully what's needed? We also need the youth to change the trajectory of air pollution for your future and the generations to come. We need to stop having more polluted air. We need blue skies for all, from now and for the future. We need everyone to take action. There are solutions. We need to make sure that we are using them. We all have a part to play, and the people on the planet depend on it. Thank you all, and the future is in your hand to make the air we breathe clean for all.
Okay, sadly enough, Heather's audio wasn't quite working, but she mainly talked about the pressing issues of air pollution and our global health, and how youth inclusion can tackle these issues, and how she wants to include more youth within decision making at the WHO as well. She's based in Geneva, so if you ever want to visit the WHO, she told me that you're always welcome, and that she can have meetings with young people to include them more. So nonetheless, she is very welcoming you, and now I give the floor back to Anna.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. We are super delighted to be joined today by Alejandro Daly. Alejandro is a youth climate activist of Colombia, specialized in air quality. He is an MPA candidate at Columbia University, and over the last 4 years he was the director of the Right to Not Obey, a social platform that aims to empower youth in Colombia to create social change and influence public policies around issues such as air pollution, climate change, refugees' rights, and peaceful mobilization. Alejandro is very busy as it's Youth Day here today at COP27, probably always. So he has to run after this, but we're super happy that you could make the time to be here with us today. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me? You should have used this microphone. This one is better. Do you hear us the same? Yeah, it's better? Okay, amazing. Hello everyone, my name is Alejandro, as you heard. I'm from Venezuela, Latin America, and I'm a young climate activist. My work as a climate activist has allowed me to understand that the climate crisis is also a public health crisis. And I think, sadly, we're not talking enough about the disproportionate effects the climate crisis is having in certain groups of people. I'm a forcibly displaced migrant. I had to leave Venezuela to go to Colombia 9 years ago due to the crisis. Air pollution, like forcibly displacement, reminds me of how things that you cannot control directly affect your future. I was born with asthma, and when I arrived to Bogota, it got worse due to air pollution. So when I was not used to have an asthma attack in Venezuela, then suddenly it just became a routinary asthma attacks in Colombia. And that was the starting point of me saying, how can I make sure that other people understand the negative effects the air pollution is having on our well-being? According to the World Health Organization, 7 million people die every year due to air pollution. And more than 1.8 billion people under the age of 15 breathe air so polluted that it risks their health and development. Actually, a fact, just in Colombia, every 50 minutes a person dies of air pollution. And we're not even the most polluted country in Latin America. So can you imagine how that works in other countries? So I want to tell you how my advocacy journey started. My experience over the last 4 years with the right to not obey is been that majority of the public officials and even young climate activists, we must say, they don't know the negative effects of air pollution. Air pollution is kind of the neglected issue in the agenda. So my story begins in 2018. I decided I wanted to make a clear case of how air pollution affects us by creating a giant pair of cotton lungs in the middle of the streets in Bogota. So you can imagine a two-size me, giant pair of cotton lungs, very white, in front of one of the busy streets in Bogota. By the end of the day, they were black. And a police officer came, I was like, oh damn. And he's like, are you gonna turn that on fire as a protest? I was like, no, no, those are a representation of your lungs. And then he says like, you know what? I actually feel sometimes I cannot breathe because I'm standing here all day. Do you feel my lungs are like that? And I said like, well, I'm not sure, but they may be. And perhaps as he saw those lungs, everyone that was passing by on the buses also saw them. And that was the beginning of a journey of saying, how can we make sure that we use science, because we support children in thousands of schools across Latin America to use low-cost sensors to monitor air pollution, but also to use art and culture to make clear that there is a case of why we need to fight air pollution to fight the climate crisis. For example, now in all these schools that we work, when there is an air pollution contingency, the kids, they decided that they were going to raise a red flag as the air quality color index. Red is very polluted. So that flag raised by the kids, it says, hey, we're in air pollution contingency. And the kids now organize to say, we cannot exercise right now in outdoors. And the teachers know what are the effects that the air pollution is having on the children. We have so far trained over 2,000 people on air pollution techniques and advocacy, and mobilized over 100,000 people in Latin America to influence public policies. We created something called the Latin American Coalition for Clean Air, which is why I'm here at COP, making sure that governments across Latin America influence public policy. And I remember I was in another event on air pollution. I just stand there and I saw the speech of one, like a marvelous doctor, and I was like, wow, if I heard this speech, I would think that I cannot do anything to fight air pollution. It's so technical. It's like, we need to change the emission of methane. It's like, I cannot change the emission of methane. I mean, I'm young, what can I do? My answer to you is, you can. I mean, air pollution, like other issues in the climate agenda, they seem too technical for young people, so they want us to just go with loss and damage, mitigation, you know, the easy topics, go ahead. We need the scientists and the public policymakers to solve this. My answer to that is not, and you have a representation here in the first part of the panel, young people, even in your countries or in my region, that are taking the lead to fight a critical issue. I mean, if we cannot protect ourselves, the present ourselves that are dying from air pollution, how can we protect the future selves that are going to die from the climate crisis? And I think my final message here would be, we need to shape the discourse and making clear that the climate crisis is a public health crisis, and we need to put health at the center of the climate agenda. If I can make you all ambassadors of the clean air agenda, I will leave this event really happy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. Thank you so much for being here. Alejandro now has to leave because he's attending another panel as well. So please spread the message. So good luck there. And we're now moving to the next part of the panel, or of the side event, because we're having a panel and there are some speakers online as well. Can we have the speakers at the screen? Yes. So we have 5 speakers online actually, that's quite a lot. And they are all specialized on youth participation and on air pollution, or either one. So you see Renske Schouwink and Eva Smit, and they are from the Jongeren Milieuraad, and they are very active in youth participation within environmental issues. We have Anjali Wijnhoven, and she is part of the CO2 Assistant Association, and they try to bring environmental knowledge within educational systems to learn more about it. Then we have Saskia van der Zee, and she is from the Public Health Service in Amsterdam, and she focuses on mitigation measures to reduce air pollution within Amsterdam and from a local perspective. And then we also have Solène Turquetti, and she is a researcher from France, and she is focused on the atmosphere and the research behind that. And then we also have Olumide, and he is going to say a few words after the panel, but please feel free to engage with the question as well if you have anything to share with us. So yeah, I leave it to you also with the questions. So Anna is moderating it mainly, but maybe we start with Anjali, because you are initiating or actually advocating for more environmental knowledge within education, especially within your medicine degree. Can you maybe elaborate on how that should look like, and how we should spend more time on environmental issues within education?
Hi, I'm Anjali. I'm a 5th year medical student at Utrecht University. And as Sarah said, we advocate for more structural education about planetary health in the medical and paramedical curricula, but also in education in general. And right now, we hardly have any education about planetary health or air pollution. We do not learn about the effect of air pollution on respiratory diseases. We do not learn about the health inequity that is associated with it, and we do not learn on how we could reduce the impact of air pollution on respiratory diseases. And even if there are some teachers who have some intrinsic motivation to incorporate a bit of information in their lectures, it's very fragmented, and it varies what we get taught about planetary health in different lectures. So what we try to do is to implement planetary health in a structural manner in every medical curriculum. And it shouldn't be based on the intrinsic motivation of some individual teachers, but it should be a core aspect of medical education, because it has such a big impact on healthcare and the health of people.
Thank you so much. It's super interesting to hear. Eva and Renske, would you maybe also try to explain very shortly like what you do with your organization?
Yes. Can you hear us? Right, perfect. Yeah, we are from the Dutch Youth Environmental Council, and we're, as Vivian Hein already mentioned in a video message, we are in contact with the Ministry of Environment to represent the Dutch youth on environmental issues and environmental policy. So that's what we're trying to do.
And as Anjali mentioned, we need more education on such issues, and you focus more on youth participation. So on the one hand, it's very important that we get educated about these topics, such as air pollution, and your organization, Renske and Eva, you focus really on their inputs and their ideas and their thoughts on it, and how, if you are at the table with ministers or policymakers, what do you want to share, or what do you want to highlight in those conversations?
So first of all, we try to highlight the importance of why the youth should be involved in these decisions, because obviously they have an impact for a very long time. and we try to make more future-proof environmental policy. So one of the things we try to highlight when it comes to air pollution is that it's very important for young people to grow up in clean air, and even though air pollution is not a very visible issue in the Netherlands, and people are maybe not as aware of the consequences as they should be, the policies to decrease this air pollution are still very important.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned a very good point, I think, the fact that air pollution is not really visible, you know. And Alejandro just mentioned the project that he did, an action in which he tried to make this visible, but I think in order to make air pollution visible, we also need research. Solène, if you could maybe tell us a bit about like how you look at environmental challenges from a researcher perspective. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, I'm a researcher, but I'm also a professor at university, so I will try to talk about both a little bit shortly. So as a researcher, what we are aiming at is understanding processes. So what explains atmospheric composition in the case of atmospheric air pollution, what explains the development of a pollution episode, what compounds are at play, how they will evolve, and quantify, provide numbers, and provide tools that may be used by society, like air quality agencies, to inform population. So we are developing numerical models, for instance, that will be used for forecasting air pollution. The things that you have on your apps initially come from research and understanding, then quantifying exposure, and having longer term also forecasting of the interaction with climate. So that's one of the tools, and of course measurements to understand these processes. And increasingly there are collaboration between the research on atmospheric chemistry in the case of air pollution and health research to really understanding what are the processes as well. So that's also an area that is evolving quite fast. And regarding the teaching part, of course we teach more to students in geoscience right now. But it's changing, and it's going to change quite fast in France, because there is a new recommendation that should be applied in the coming years to have teaching of the environmental issues and environmental transition to all students, to all undergraduate students, even in arts, in all fields. So that will be a huge challenge, because of course we tend to talk about our molecules, and that's not really what we need to do for this.
And Anjali, if Solène mentioned, there's now a new recommendation on including environmental issues in education for all students. Would that be something that would you have in mind in the Netherlands as well, or should it be more than that?
No, definitely. I think it's a great step that France has taken this this policy. I think as a first step, I think it would be great if the Netherlands would apply a similar policy, and it would mean that the bottom-up initiatives, such as our group, are reinforced by top-down policy, and they would meet in the middle, which would be ideal.
Yes, thank you. And then we also have Saskia with us today, and she is from the Public Health Service, as I mentioned earlier. And Saskia, how do you include your youth within your work, or where do you see the challenges within youth participation at the local level especially?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for being here. It's really nice. I think I'm one of the older attendants in the room. one of the things that we have done is developing a package, a lesson package for primary school children. I actually can show it. To start at the primary school level for children aged 9-10 years old. But the focus of our work at the Public Health Service is not on education because we have limited time for that, unfortunately. We focus on improving air quality in Amsterdam and also surrounding areas. And of course, children are a very vulnerable subgroup for the effects of air pollution. And that goes for children and for adolescents and also even for unborn children. So our focus is on improving air quality in Amsterdam and more general in the Netherlands. And one of the things that we have done in Amsterdam is that we have developed a policy that new schools and daycare centers are not allowed to be sited in close proximity to highway or very busy roads in order to protect children from exposure to traffic-related air pollution. And well, that is one of the actions that we have taken, among others, to improve air quality and reach better health for children and all inhabitants of Amsterdam.
Yes, thank you for that. And the toolbox looks super exciting and interesting. I maybe want to move to Eva and Renske. I heard that you're developing like a participation tool surrounding these topics. Can you explain a bit what it entails? How it works?
Yes, of course. So indeed, we are working on a participation tool, which basically means that it is a questionnaire, but a fun questionnaire for young people, where they can give their opinion on environmental policy and what they would choose if they would be a policy maker. And we try to not only inform them, but also give them the opportunity to give their opinion, as I said, and to be informed on environmental issues. So that's the participation tool.
Maybe, Saskia, if you hear this, do you hear like this is something that could be useful in ensuring more youth participation in fighting air pollution?
Yeah, I think it's a very good step. It's very important to involve young people into this topic because they have the future, of course. So I think that's very, very important. I think that in addition to involving young people into the subject, it's also important that there will be more strict regulation and legislation because it's not enough to involve people. We really need measurements to improve air quality, and that starts with legislation and regulation. So it's a combination of the two that will help us for a better future.
Yes, and before we move to the next question for the panel, I also want to invite Olumide for, do you want to reflect on anything that has been said already before? You have your statement at the end of the session, of course, but do you have anything that you want to reflect on already, or?
Okay, thank you so much. For me, my friend here have actually opened a conversation on why air pollution is very, very critical as a conversation. And I keep telling people that air pollution is a killer, is a silent killer. And the urgent action is for us to understand that if we don't find a conducive environment, how do we want to find ourselves here? If this place is polluted, nobody will be able to see it. It's because we have a little bit of fresh air, that's why we'll be able to see. And one thing again is, if you look at air pollution as a cluster, I don't see the conversation going on in the conference. We are majorly focusing on different other things. And back home, I'm from Lagos, Nigeria, Lagos, and air pollution is a very big issue, majorly because it's an industrial area. There's a lot of, whether it's transportation pollution, water pollution. It has been a very big concern, but I don't see a lot of world leaders, or let me say state actors, actually pushing for that. And if you see the solutions that people are talking about air pollution, the solutions are very capital intensive. And it's high time for us to start looking at what are the mechanisms, what are the channels for us to see how we can provide solution to air pollution. Another thing I want to say is education. It's also very important that people understand what's the impact of air pollution to them. If you go to a school, for instance, putting like 100 students in one class, how do you want to, understand the way they are assimilating information when the place is not conducive? So air pollution is actually a conversation that we need to remind ourselves, because without clean air, there's no how we can actually have the space of the environment to stay. So for me, I accept everything they are saying. And under education as well, I think we need to invest more in research so that people will be able to understand that if I do this, this is the effect or this is the impact on me. So that all this data can also give us a sort of urgent point before we start talking about issue of loss and damage. I'm not saying it's not a big issue too, but air pollution is a conversation that it encompasses everything we are doing. So, and I want to commend the people working on this kind of project, because they're actually making us to understand that without a conducive environment, we'll not be able to have a movement of free movement for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think what we have heard so far, like more youth inclusion, more education, also including the problems or the challenges of air pollution on our health, like those awarenesses are very important. And this is actually a question to the rest of the panel as well. So please interrupt me if you have an answer, but what are still the challenges on how to improve the current situation, to include more youth and to stress the importance of the pressing issues of air pollution within education? What do we still need? Like, we have a participation tool already from the Jongeren Milieuraad, which is very important, but where do you see challenges which still can be improved from your point of view? Anjali, and then after the Renske and Eva?
You can also go ahead first, I don't mind. But, I think that from my perspective as a medical student, one of the key gaps at this moment is that people, not only medical students, but the general public is not really aware of the effects of air pollution. Like, of course, we all have this intuition that it's important to breathe clean air, but air pollution doesn't only affect your the respiratory system. It doesn't only cause pulmonary disease, but it also causes cardiovascular disease, which lots of people are struggling with. It increases the risk for Alzheimer's, for Parkinson's, for depression, for even possibly ADHD in a prenasal phase, as Saskia was mentioning. So I think the actual impact on our health of air pollution people should raise awareness for the actual impact of air pollution, and not only mention air pollution as a bad thing.
Right, thank you. And Eva and Renske, do you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you. I think apart from awareness, the diversity of the people who are being represented is sometimes quite a big issue. This is also something we as an organization are struggling with. Most of our members are educated at academic level, and they are very concerned about the environment, often studying something related to that. But we want to make sure that we represent a much broader section of our society and really be representation of the Dutch youth in general. So this is also why we developed the participation tool, so we can really reach out actively to a lot of young people who would otherwise not take that step, because there is quite a large barrier to participate in political or policy processes, because it can be quite difficult and complicated and mostly also time consuming. We really try to reach out, and hopefully we can make sure to also reach the people who would otherwise not be included.
Yes, thank you for that. And maybe I want to jump in on that. because you mentioned like you reach out to like a certain profile of people, or you like those are the people who reach out to you. And I mean, I think if we look in the room here, we also kind of see that for example, youth representatives as well, they would like, you know, a certain kind of highly educated people that are mostly the ones that can join these kind of spaces. But also in the sense that climate, just as well as air pollution, do affect us differently, you know, as groups in the society. So Saskia, maybe I would love to turn to you first, and then Solène, we will come to you, if that's all right. So my question is, considering that air pollution discriminates between different groups, how presents this problem itself in Amsterdam? And how does your organization help to secure health for all? Thank you.
Yes. You're talking about the environmental injustice, I think, and actually that's really a big issue globally. The low-income countries that have poor air quality, that's really a big issue. That's often also related to household air pollution, and not having access to clean cooking devices, like the lady from the WHO already mentioned. So that's really globally a big issue, and also in many countries, for example in the United States. But in the Netherlands and also in Amsterdam, this is not really a problem, in the sense that, of course, also in Amsterdam and in the Netherlands, people with low socioeconomic status have poor health, which is a big problem, and our organization is really working hard on that issue, but it's not very much related to air quality. What we see in Amsterdam is that the worst air quality is found in the historic inner city, and that's a very expensive part of Amsterdam, where people live who have relatively, absolutely high income, most of them. So in Amsterdam it's even maybe the other way around, and in general in the Netherlands we have best air quality in the clean and less densely populated northeastern part, and this area has the lowest socioeconomic status. So this does not really, in relation to air quality, go for the Netherlands, but it really does in other parts of the world and also in many countries.
Thank you. Solène, I think you wanted to jump in?
Yes, sorry. Just maybe on what's just been said, in a city like Paris, it's more or less the same thing as in Amsterdam. The center of Paris is extremely expensive, but there are still some inequalities, because a lot of lower income people will live close to higher, denser traffic zones, and that's a huge inequality in exposure to many pollutants. So that even in richer areas, maybe social buildings would be closer to a highway, and so that's also something that needs to be tackled. And maybe to come back on the engagement of young generations, I think also we need to present an alternative in order to have a wider, more diverse engagement of young people, and really propose something that is positive and engaging as an alternative to current practice, and something that is inclusive. And not only present the risks, but also what we can do and how that is also a positive change in many other areas. And I think that's also something that can be, that is important for climate, that is important for air quality, and we need to be careful when we present these issues about increasing anxiety around these issues. And I see that with my students a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a very important issue that you mentioned, because climate anxiety, especially around these issues of air pollution, can also be very pressing on young people and can, enable them to act. So I think that's also a very important point. And today we're of course at COP27, and imagine yourself sitting at the table with a lot of world leaders, and maybe there are some, well, we're all young leaders here in the room, so like if you want to share anything with them, with the room, but also with the broader audience at COP, what would be a message for you to share, and what do you really want to, give them actually here, and what should they do at COP in these 2 weeks to really, impose action in this field? Can be anyone, by the way. I'm not directing questions specifically to anyone, but.
Okay, so I can continue if you want, very, very, very briefly.
Yeah.
It's a very, very difficult question, of course, because we are at COP and we are talking about air quality. I really want to stress that it's 2 separate challenges, and also from the scientific perspective, improving air quality is not always a benefit for climate. So, because a lot of the particles that are so harmful for health actually compensates the warming from greenhouse gases. And that's a difficult and also a source of anxiety for some. That's a very difficult issue. So there really needs to be strategies for both, because there are very strong impacts for both, and also synergies in tackling these issues, and strong synergies as well. And that's why there's so much attention in the last IPCC report on methane, because that's a good candidate.
Thank you so much.
If I can maybe add to that, and I really agree with Celine. For instance, biomass burning is also something that has been seen for a long time as very sustainable. Well, there's a lot of discussion about it, and it's really bad for the emissions of particulate air pollution. So that's one important issue. Well, like I already said before, I think a very important action is that we adopt strong air quality guidelines. So really regulations and air quality guidelines that are strict, so that we really have to meet them, and that is also a legal binding to meet those air quality guidelines. And we just have to reduce emissions from combustion sources altogether.
And I also saw Anjali raising her hand.
Yeah, also Celine and Saskia are both way more experienced with the impact of fine particle matters and that sort of stuff. So I'm going to leave that with them. But for the medical part, I think there's also a double message, because I feel that future healthcare professionals should be properly prepared for the future, and they should know how to they should know both the impact of air pollution on health, but also the impact of healthcare on air quality, because hospitals are a great contributor to air pollution and the production of greenhouse gases. So I think both of these aspects should be addressed. For instance, teaching students about the effect of so Alejandra was talking about asthma earlier. There are 2 types of asthma medication inhalers. You have metered dose inhalers and dry powder inhalers. Metered dose inhalers actually contain very strong greenhouse gases. So these sort of things, they should be mentioned in the medical curriculum, so future health professionals can make an informed decision on what they prescribe for their patients and how much that is contributing to air pollution and greenhouse gases.
Yes. And then specifically for Renske and Eva, are there, Viviane Heijnen, our Minister for the Environment, already mentioned that she wants to be very open for youth and their inputs. And do you still see limitations within the Netherlands, but also internationally? Do you still see limitations for youth participation, like how you can contribute, or do you think that you can already say a lot and contribute a lot and participate or do you still see challenges for these inputs? Because something that Anjali mentioned, for example, is very meaningful to give to the minister. So do you still see limitations within participation that can still be improved?
Yeah, I think, well, as I mentioned before, I think the diversity is a very important issue that also should be kept in mind by policymakers and by politicians, but also the awareness and the information that people have. So education has been mentioned before. It's very difficult for young people, for any citizen to say something about air pollution if they don't know much about it. So yeah, I think that will just stay very important. And at the same time, well, we actually are in quite a unique position where we were really invited by a particular team within the ministry to contribute. But I think very often youth organizations have to really fight for their spot at the table, and it can lower so many barriers if we are actively reached out to and invited to participate, because it is quite a large barrier to enter this whole process of policy making. So I think that's something that policymakers and politicians could keep in mind, to actively reach out and make sure that young people are included.
Yes, I completely agree. And I also think it's sad that Olumide had to leave earlier, but he is from Nigeria, from Lagos, and he really focuses on youth participation as well. And also with this perspective from the Global South, really, there's unequal access to youth participation, really, globally. So it's sad that he had to leave earlier, but I think that we should be aware of that as well, that not everybody can contribute equally. Like in the Netherlands, we have, in the Netherlands it's also far from perfect, of course, but we have some tools that we can work with, but in the Global South or internationally, we can still make some progress as well. So, I don't know, you had one more question, right, for the panel?
Actually, it suits perfectly with what you just said, Sarah, so that's perfect. Yeah, I was wondering, because we just said, there are quite some barriers still, but then on the other hand, the Netherlands, and I can speak for Belgium as well, we are making great steps in youth participation, and politicians see the value of youth participation more and more. So I was wondering, also for us to take away here at COP27, what are good practices of youth participation that you have encountered, what works well, and what can we advise other leaders to implement in their strategies?
I think I think what's really essential is that all youth organizations bundle together and really empower each other and help each other, and I think that's how we can have the most impact. So I think that's what's maybe missing a bit now in the Netherlands, and what we really need to work on to have a good stand for and a good position within policy making.
Yeah, we can maybe also open the floor for the audience here today in the room, because I see a lot of youth representatives amongst us, and also the Youth Climate Movement is also present with us today. So also for the audience here, do you want to share best practices or where you see challenges as well within this topic?
Anjali, I think you wanted to answer as well, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with Ivan Renske. I also wanted to add one good practice was the Dutch Ministry of Health invited the CO2 assistant and a teacher from Utrecht University to talk about how planetary health should be incorporated in medical curriculum. So that was a really good example of how young people get a voice in the Dutch Ministry of Health, for instance.
Thank you. Maybe the other two speakers, if you know any practices of youth participation that you think were very inspiring and really help develop the debate, feel welcome to share.
Yeah, and also for the audience, if you want to pose a question maybe to the panel, or is there something you want to share right now? Yeah?
Hello? Okay. Hi, my name is Trina. I just wanted to reemphasize, yes, the importance of making information accessible, especially to young people. A lot of emissions data, especially for pollutants that contribute to air pollution, is hard to read, to be completely honest. And we need to really, I mean, what I was thinking is like go to elementary schools and teach kids how to read, you know, the air pollution data, or make an app that makes it easier, and then we can call out the local polluters. Like with methane emissions, that contributes to local air pollution, and it's a lot of it is caused by like leaking wells, like methane leaking from abandoned wells from oil and gas companies that set it up and then left it behind, and they're not going to clean it up. So can we put pressure on them? And so that's one of the, I mean, things that I think we should be doing, and we should be emphasizing that kind of action more. But I was wondering, you know, any other insights related to things like methane or black carbon or like pollutants, or is it easier for, like what kind of things are easier to educate young people about, I think?
Can I just ask a question to you as well? Do you see education in this conversation then as like a justice, like a matter of justice?
Yes, definitely. And you can also see in this U.S., for example, a lot of underfunded schools are being co-opted by people from oil and gas companies that are teaching climate misinformation to students. And so we need to have good science being taught, but the science must also be accessible so that young people and any kind of people can understand the science, and it's not just something you have to pay to access that information, or, you know, go to college to be able to understand these kinds of things. We should, I don't know, like something about comms, or maybe, I have no idea, but yeah, these are the kinds of things that I think we should raise, and I really love all the work that you're all doing, so thank you as well.
I think this is a good question for Saskia, maybe, because you see a lot of data, right, at the Public Health Service in Amsterdam to reduce air pollution locally. And do you see where we could maybe make data and information about air pollution more accessible to young people, or is there a way to explain it better to them? Because we have been talking about awareness and education, but you made a fair point. If we not even understand the data, how can we increase youth participation at all? So do you see maybe best practices, or how would you improve this accessibility to this data from your point of view?
Yes, it's a very good point, because it's a really complicated field with many compounds of air pollution and difficulties to measure it, different health effects. So one thing that we did with all the public health services in the Netherlands is give information on the website, not specifically for young people, but for the general public at a very easy to understand manner. So that's really in a simple way for everyone to understand. And another thing that's not so much something that Public Health Service is doing, but the National Institute, they are measuring air pollution with school children. So they can measure air pollution themselves. They can build very simple tools to measure particulate matter, and of course it's not scientifically sound, and it's not perfect, but it gives a really good impression, and it's really helping young people to understand the issues. And that's something that our colleagues in Beeldhoven are involved in, and that's also something that is really helping, I think, to give more information to young people.
Yes, thank you so much. And I was thinking it is indeed super important to have this accessible information that is understandable, that is clear. But then also, of course, how do you get this information to the people that need this information, like to bridge this gap that sometimes exists maybe some of the youth organizations can have like an answer to that?
Ooh, that's a hard question too, though. I think, of course, social media is one of the ways that we can engage with young people, but I think that is also something that we really have to explore further and really ask advice from different parties, because I think that's something that even in general participation in the ministry that they're struggling with. So yeah, we would like to have a solution, but we're working on it. So.
But a requirement for that is that the information is understandable for the target audience. So yeah, really use easy language, explain everything that needs to be explained and that you can't reasonably expect somebody to already know. And I think what was mentioned before by someone from the audience was, make sure that if somebody wants access to data, and maybe that's for really young kids, that's a bit too much, but even if you're starting there, start in like a very easy and accessible way, make people maybe grow into it a bit more.
Yeah, I think as for our participation too, we also have been testing the language used in it. So we've been asking young children from 15 years old up until like 25 years old who are not in the field to give feedback on what kind of language we've used and if it's really comprehensible for them, or comprehensive for them. So that's what we've been trying to do.
Might add to that. Also, Saskia, I read the information on the public health website. It's great. But I want to add to that I think one of the factors that increases the difficulty of engaging youth is the health inequity that was mentioned earlier. The fact that, for instance, in countries as China and India, the average life expectancy is decreased way more by air pollution than it is in the Netherlands or in the United States. And I think also presenting clear numbers on that, for instance, saying, I think the numbers are like 0.1 year decrease in life expectancy in the US versus about 6 years in decrease in life expectancy in India. It makes it more visual for people to understand how big of an impact it really has.
Yeah, and it's a good point. And maybe to add to that, another attempt that we made a few years ago to explain it in a more easy way, because it's really a complicated subject, is that we developed a tool to express the health effects of air pollution in an equivalent number of passively smoked cigarettes. So, for example, in Amsterdam in 2015, I think it was, the air quality was comparable to daily smoking 6 cigarettes a day. So we developed a tool that is, I think it's too complicated for, it's not accessible for everybody, but it was at least an attempt for us to communicate, because also if you say, your life expectancy is reduced by, for example, 4 weeks, people respond, 4 weeks. If I will turn 84 or 84.1, doesn't really matter. So this was for us, it really helped, and it was also picked up by the environmental organization Milieudefensie. They calculated for every country in the Netherlands the number of equivalent passively smoked cigarettes. So that, the tool is available. It's on our website. So this is also something that might help maybe to increase awareness in an easy, accessible way.
Yeah, and I think Solène also want to say something.
Yes. Yeah. No, I completely agree to everything that was said, and particularly participation, participatory science is also a very powerful tool. And if you have a captor, there are now available several microcaptors for air quality. If you measure what you're actually breathing, and if you understand how that translates, if you explain that, that's very powerful in awareness. And then for going from awareness to possible actions is also very important. So maybe working in more systematically informing on the activity sectors that are contributing to health damage, or maybe just to pollution peaks, even if it's shown as indexes and not concentrations of pollutants, which are too difficult to read. That's also very important, because you understand that the pollution you're breathing is traffic, it's residential emissions, it's combustion from industries. It depends on the regions, but in many areas it's really direct emissions through traffic. So it means that if you have an action, it will have a direct impact on what you're breathing, and it will have an immediate impact on what you're breathing, and a direct effect on health. So that's also, I think, important to understand. And for this, it's a little bit different than climate issues. So maybe a little bit easier as well, because you have the direct impact of efforts.
Yeah, I think maybe what Alejandro mentioned earlier, that health should be at the center of the climate crisis. I think maybe education should be really at the center of youth participation. So making data and research and other sources of information more accessible to young people within education is very important. And the fact that we do not really can mention very specific good practices also shows that we should also focus here at COP at better accessible information within educational systems about climate crisis and especially air pollution. So I think that's very important, and that's what I kind of can summarize from what we have been saying so far. But I also want to open the floor for maybe a Q&A. So if there are some specific questions, maybe you can come forward to raise a question. Yeah, can you come forward? Then we can. Yes, great.
Hi, hello. My name is Martine Doppe and I work for Fossil-Free Advertising. And we try to work together a lot with physicians, and especially young physicians. And they do very well in, for example, Canada and the UK. Like groups of millions of physicians stand up for climate action, and they emphasize especially air pollution. And in the Netherlands, I'm not so sure. We are our plan is for the coming year to really focus on the health community in the Netherlands too. And I think it can be super powerful. But I feel also like that maybe the medical students should learn more to be political active, and also to learn more about planetary health. And I think that's very much missing here in the Netherlands. And I also, maybe it's a question do you focus already on this, on medical students, because they are seen as experts once they are physicians? So the question is, do you focus on this already? And are there maybe examples of other countries where they focus specifically on medical students?
I turn to our panel for this question.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more. We definitely need to target young medical professionals, because they are the future and they have such a powerful voice in the public debate. So you see that health professionals are engaging with the public debate more and more. So we should definitely educate young professionals on how to do that and how to advocate what they stand for. I know a couple of countries that have a strong focus on young medical professionals as well. For instance, in the Philippines, there's a really nice initiative by Renzo Quinto, a great researcher, and we also collaborated with them on a joint symposium. And I know that a couple of other countries, I think San Diego has a really good initiative for education in the medical curricula about planetary health as well. But yeah, it's still very fragmented, it's still very young, it's still very bottom-up, just some young people with intrinsic motivation for the subject who just try to do as much as they can. And that's why I said earlier that we need some support from governments and the top-down movement, basically.
I think it's also a super important question, because against ties into this need for education on the impact of air pollution, right? Because if medical students are not taught on the impact of air pollution on health, how will they become activists and how will they become politically active, because they're not familiar with the problem that is right in front of them. So I think this is like ties in very neatly. I'm not sure if anyone else on the panel maybe wants to add to this.
I think maybe we should broaden this to not only the medical students, but also students within other within other areas, because I don't know, maybe in computer science or in artificial intelligence, there's also some impacts on the environment, and I think that there's still a long way to go, not only for medical students, but yeah.
Is there another question from the audience for the panel? Or if you want to share anything? Maybe Dirk from the Dutch delegation.
Is it working? Thanks. Hi guys, I'm Dirk from the Netherlands, colleague of Dennis and Sarah. Well, perhaps I think I heard one of the panelists say something on the sort of the infrastructure and city planning. I think the panelists at the bottom of the screen said something on the sort of the traffic emissions. And I think, for example, in the Netherlands we're quite active in the sort of smart city infrastructure that also involves, for example, cycling and walking, active mobility. I think that might also be a key to look at this issue. However, perhaps my question to the panel could be, how can we better involve youth in this? Because often infrastructural planning is something which is very long term. I recently heard that about 80% of the infrastructure of 2070 worldwide has still to be built. So there's actually infrastructures for the long term. So if we really want to have sound infrastructure that also takes air quality better into account, how can we also get young voices in that system, as they are very much involved, of course, in the cities of the future?
Yeah, good question. Can I maybe forward this question to Saskia?
Sure, it's a very good point that you raised, Dirk. Thank you. Because indeed, active transport, cycling, walking is very important, not only in relation to air pollution, but also in general, because physical activity is very, very important. I think that one of the ways to reach this is, for example, in Amsterdam. The city is increasingly designed for people cycling and walking using public transportation, and it is really, starting in 2030, for starters, all traffic is supposed to be zero emission, but also the car is banned out of the city, and in this way you get very attractive cities designed for people to play, to cycle. Of course, in the Netherlands we have an infrastructure with where cycling is very important already. So I think that especially in the cities a lot can be done to promote cycling and active transport. And what you see in Amsterdam is that most of the young people, they don't own cars anymore, because it's much faster and cheaper and easier to reach everything by public transportation or by a bike. And also it's really, and it's also a good thing, I think, it's really expensive to park your car. So those are measures that the city can take to de-stimulate transport by car and stimulate other forms of transport.
Thank you. I think it's very like a hopeful message if you see around you that young people are the ones who are actually leading in their practices to make solutions and to actually live these solutions, for solutions against the air pollution. So that's a really nice message to get here. I think maybe there in the back was another question. Yeah, you can. Maybe that phone.
Yes, thank you so much to all the panelists. My name is Aniek Mona and I'm the chair of the Dutch Youth Climate Movement. I was really triggered by the previous question about infrastructure in cities, and etc. Especially because as a movement in the Netherlands, we've asked young people from all over the country what they want their lives to look like in 2050. And what is kind of outstanding in that vision for 2040 is that young people say that they don't necessarily want their own car. And they increasingly start to demand for cities that are completely auto or car free. So it's not even allowed for cars to be there. So on the one hand, I think it's good that we increase the likability that people actually take their bikes or walk places by, making sure that there's nice bike lanes, etc. But on the one hand, I think we also have to make sure that we stress the cars and the fact that we don't want them in our cities anymore. It's interesting how you see that in young generations this is not necessarily a taboo, and they're relatively much agreed on the fact that they don't want their cities to be car-free, but yet in the places where these decisions are being made, so in maybe local councils or national councils, it's a really, really big issue, and it's definitely not an issue that's currently at the table. So how do we make sure that this issue maybe becomes more of an intergenerational discussion so that we can make sure that our cities are going to be car-free and therefore have so much less air pollution? Thank you.
I think this was both a statement maybe and a question, but maybe Saskia, you can have a few more words on this, how to make, for example, Amsterdam car-free eventually?
Yes, well, in Amsterdam, very important steps have been taken already. So this is really an ongoing process in our city. But I think one of the things that young people can do is also be involved in local politics. Well, that is one for start. Also, for example, in the City Council of Amsterdam. Political involvement also on a local scale to have an impact on local measures is, I think, very important.
Yes, thank you. And maybe to close this side event with a few final remarks, I think this side event was also very aimed at international corporations, so I'm very happy to see that the room was actually pretty full at the start of the side event, and which was very nice. And for the panelists to share their knowledge and their ideas and their insights. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it, and I think we all learned a lot and we raised awareness about this topic. And as a starting point now, we actually saw this side event also as a starting point for a platform to launch and provide more international cooperation between youth on this topic. So we also wanted to provide more intergenerational dialogues at a structural manner, actually. So this is COP, and there are walking around many policymakers, many politicians, many world leaders, but we have to keep this conversation going after COP as well. So I'm really glad that you listened all today, but I think we should start sharing our best practices every year at a certain time, at a certain place. So what we're advocating for as youth representative is also that we want to provide a platform for you all. Oh, I see a question. I will get back to you in a minute. But we want to provide a platform where you can share as young people your ideas and your insights, and then we can collect them and share them with policymakers. Sorry, I keep messing those two up, but politicians and policymakers, to keep this conversation going, because I think we have seen during this side event that there are still things structurally missing. So education is missing, accessible information is missing, and eventually, our right on global health is at risk. So I think there are many issues still at hand within this theme and within this field, and we as youth representatives really want to create this platform. So after COP there will also be a few follow-ups and we will organize more events on this topic. So please be welcome to that, and we will make it hybrid so that the whole world can actually participate. And I saw a question in the back still, so if you would like to share that with us. Yeah, definitely, but that's fine.
Hi, I'm representing European Law Students Association here at COP. Just to share a few thoughts with you. So, yes, education is important. Yes, access to information is important. But then the question is what we're doing with this. So, I mean, yes, it's all good, but we kind of also need funding. We need empowerment and just to push to start talking and speaking out. And the fact that audience here was mostly composed by youth representatives is something that, at least for me, brings a lot of hope. And you know, like, we as new generation, as youth, as future policymakers, as people who will hopefully be on this planet for very long now, it's our duty to talk with our parents, with our grandparents, and just, you know, with talking and showing them what they can do, change things little by little. And I mean, I see this with my parents, with my grandma who's like 82, and I was explaining to her one day why I switched to plant-based diet, and she was like, oh, but this actually makes a lot of sense, you know. But so just speaking and, you know, little actions are something that will hopefully improve the situation on the long run.
Thank you so much for that. And actually, I might want to add just something to the debate myself as well, if I may, from my co-moderator.
Yeah, sure.
We've been speaking about formal learning quite a lot during this debate. And I think being a representative of Youth Council, who is also representing youth organizations and youth work, I think it's also important to not lose track of the youth sector in a broader sense, you know, and to also be aware of the fact that informal learning is also super important. And that goes from the connection to nature to the impact of air pollution to so many other topics. If also the youth sector can be involved in this process, can be you know, more aware of the problems of air pollution, I think they can also be a very important actor in mobilizing youth to address this problem. So,
yeah, definitely. And as you said, I completely agree with you. We should really be engaging with policymakers, the governments, and that's why I'm very happy that Dirk has joined us today, because he is from the Dutch delegation, so he has been listening to our inputs as well. So we should do this structurally. So that's why we want to launch this platform to engage with youth and to gather their input and then plug the input with our policymakers and governments eventually. So this is also a call for a very strong European network especially, and also eventually an international network where we can combine all the inputs and really raise awareness on this topic, because, you know, a right on clean air is also a right on global health, and that is very important. And the last thing I want to mention is tomorrow at the WHO pavilion there is another side event about clean air and air pollution and the right on global health at 3:30 at the WHO pavilion. So we should structurally talk about this topic, but not only at COP, also beyond COP. So I really want to thank the online speakers today, and for the ones that are in the Netherlands, I'm giving you a cup with Stop Air Pollution with the logo of ours, so I will send them to your homes. And with Solène, I will figure something out with the French youth representative to give you a cup as well, because we really want to thank you for today and for your insights and your ideas and your knowledge, so thank you very much.
Yeah, also from me, as well the speakers, as our own audience, thanks for being here, thanks for sharing all these super interesting insights, and we'll definitely take them with us us, here at COP and after that. So thank you and have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.